security. We have joining us via the phone and also live on video on Facebook and YouTube, Ajuri Ngelale. He's the Senior Special Assistant for Public Affairs for the President. Welcome, Ajuri.
Thank you so much. Good morning.
Thank you so much. Good morning to you and good morning to our viewers and our listeners out there. It's really a privilege to be on this program.
Better with that sound. Would have to do a bit better with that sound, but we can see you here. Can you? Okay, we're working that out in a moment. But head over to Facebook.
Yes, I can hear you.
Tell us what you see. If you can, all right there. We can see you live there. So let's start off with the Aswan forum. Which, of course, and the first question I saw Nigerians asking was, why does the president announce things like this to us outside of the country?
Outside of the country.
Why do we get to know?
I mean, we get to hear this first.
From when he was in Egypt. Was this pre-planned or was this a spur of the moment thing for the president? Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, let me just say that, the president has made many announcements within the country. It's not something that's unusual for heads of state to gather together at these forums and announce to their colleagues and to the international press some of the kind of procedures or policies or activities that will affect the international community in a way that's unique. When we look at what was actually announced, we would be able to appreciate that this is an international initiative, essentially. What you're doing is you're telling the international community that this is now going to be, this visa on arrival program, effective in January 2020, is going to be something that's obviously going to have a huge amount of impact on international investors, on international public actors, private sector operators, etc. So, it just makes sense that if you're in a room with Bloomberg, you're in a room with CNN and all of these other international news networks, as well as Nigerian media, by the way, who are also present there, then it just makes sense to share that information with those who will impact the most.
Ajuri, but let's track back a little. Some time ago, some few weeks ago, the federal government closed the land borders, and it took a while, but then eventually other African countries started responding to it. Governments across Africa, they were concerned as to why Nigeria closed its land borders, and to them it's unreasonable because it's actually hampering that integration the African nations were trying to put together to make sure that there is free flow of trade on the continent. And then there were backlash every now and again, and the president went to Aswan Forum and announced this, and critics of this administration have said that this government is just trying to compensate for the land borders that is currently ongoing because, it's a known factor that the federal government has said there is no end in sight for the land borders. Right. Would you say that this is just an attempt to calm the frayed nerves of our African neighbors by saying, look, you can come in, we'll give you a visa when you arrive? Are we overcompensating?
Well, thank you very much. It's an intelligent question. I will just say that, when we hear some of, like you actually referred to them as critics. Not all of them that make these kinds of views known are critics. Some of them are just analysts who have their own, independent opinions about what is right or wrong with whatever the administration is putting forward. But let me say this. When we look at what the backlash was from Benin Republic, the government actors there, government actors in Ghana, etc., it was very clear why they were upset. We all know what happened. We know that there was a multi-billion-dollar criminal cartel of illicit smugglers who were bringing in goods through the Benin Republic ports, paying hundreds of millions of dollars of levies and excise duties to that government, right? And then they're bringing in these bags, slashing the bags open, and emptying the contents into bags that say made in Benin Republic instead of made in Vietnam so that they can come into the country. I want to be very clear about something. The ECOWAS free trade protocols are explicit. There's not gray area there. It explicitly states that no nation within the bloc, including Nigeria, by the way, can export to another country, to another neighbor within ECOWAS, any good that it is not producing. They were obviously bringing rice and all of these different goods that they were not producing across the border. That is illicit. That breaks the protocols of ECOWAS free trade agreements. Now, let me also say that that's from the perspective of those who were, crying out in the aftermath of the border closure. The next point is we're talking about land border closure, right? So much gets talked about in terms of border closure, that you almost get the impression that the nation just kind of shut down, like there's an import and an export embargo on pretty much all, trade. And that's just simply not true. There's a reason why, for example, our imports have gone from, our customs duties, our customs revenue generation has gone from 4.5 billion naira per day to now about 9 billion naira per day. That's double. So that should tell you that in stopping the illicit flows over the land border, the legal flows coming in from the airports, the seaports, are coming in at a higher rate. So therefore, free trade is not really being hampered here.
Especially. But let's quickly speak with Mr. James Sunday, who's joining us just for a few minutes because he has to travel. We thank you for joining us. He's the Public Relations Officer of the Nigeria. All right, let me come quickly to Ajuri on this one. So with the explanation Mr. James has given to us, our borders, our ports, our airports are now open to Africans, not just members of the ECOWAS, to leave their countries and show up at the airport. There isn't a process before they leave their country. So we have more people. This is what I see happening, showing up at our airports and just trying to get their biometrics done and get into the country.
Which means the ratio of them being rejected is quite low because you're telling them to just come.
To come. So, okay, before we go on this, let me ask Mr. James. So, I mean, that's a good point Sheriff made there. What's the checklist that we're looking at? Why can we turn away an African who shows up? Do we have a checklist that will say you need to meet these conditions right there at the port before we allow you in? Mr. James?
I mentioned to you the various checks and verification process that the service embark upon. And for a very good reason, I think we should trust fellow African citizens for the very first time.
We should do what?
We should trust them.
We should trust fellow African citizens for the very first time, particularly if they have not put understand. Our security agencies are not sleeping.
Okay.
Every instrument is deployed to make sure that anybody coming to the country is first checked. We verify their documents, and the visa regime is a means of control. Before entry, we control at the point of entry, and we also control with. Because we have manners of process we use in checking where an individual is coming, and that's why the visa is being given in categorization. Exactly. If you are coming for tourism, they give you a tourist visa. When you are coming as a visitor, they give you a visitor's pass. When you are transit, pass. When they give you a visa. All of these are means of control.
Okay, your line is breaking up, but we can still hear you. Ajuri, let me come to you on this. So we're having more Africans coming, which might be good for trade and tourism. But what's the plan to actually deal with this booming number of Africans that will show up at our borders?
And that's a definite.
That's just going to happen. What's the plan?
Thank you very much. I've been listening very carefully to the conversation. I want to make it very clear the steps that have been taken in a way that is very, very precise for our people to hear and understand. First of all, we recognize that security is a major concern that our people have. The idea that if we just bring in a whole bunch of strangers that we don't know the good from the bad. And so we want our people to understand that the processes that we're putting in place ahead of the implementation of this visa on arrival plan is, first of all, we have a series of databases. You have the Interpol database, which we share the benefits of, just like Turkey, just like Dubai, just like countries around the world, China, the US, you name it. We have other individual agency by agency databases. So, for example, the DSS, the NIA, their bilateral or multilateral engagements with other intelligence services around the world. the Immigration Service has access to those databases. So when we talk about terrorist elements, those who have been engaged in it, those who are on watch lists, those who are on any kind of a yellow or a red alert, they're all there in full view of all of our immigration services at all of the entry points. That's number one. Number two, the idea that these people are just coming in without any kind of real scrutiny is not really correct. We are not asking Nigerians simply to trust our African neighbors. That no nation does that. We have to have processes in place.
And
that's what we have done.
That shocked me when I heard. That really shocked me.
Right.
No, that's not.
No, that's not correct. That is not correct. That is absolutely not the position at all. We are very, very serious about process and procedure. You can't just trust anybody to just show up at your door and then you just say, I trust you're a good person. That's not how it works anywhere in the world. You have to have processes and procedures that will be able to effectively sift between those who are good and those who are bad. Anybody that has a criminal record within the intelligence services, within the databases of their own countries, in their own African countries, we will be able to see that within the coordinated system that we have. That's number one. Number two, the important thing I need to mention is that when they get to the point of arrival, you ask the question, if you have so many people coming in, how are we going to handle that? I want to make it very clear that with this circular, we have already had an instruction from the presidency to ensure that the immigration service is able to elevate and escalate the number of agents that are going to be at the arrival points at all points in the country across our airports to accommodate the increase in flow. But I need to say something very important. It's not every person that will come to Nigeria, right? With a passport, with a flight ticket, and all of these things, without some understanding of what they want to do. I want us to be very clear about the difference between, say, the influx into a place like South Africa as opposed to Nigeria. Sure. Nigeria is not a place where you come and you're going to just wake up with 24 hours electricity, perfect roads, perfect bridges, perfect airports, perfect seaports. We're still developing. We're working very hard on those things, but we're not quite there yet. So the idea that the people coming in, taking advantage of this visa on arrival policy are criminal elements, are people who don't have some sort of means, but they have the ability to get a flight ticket to pay for their visa, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. I think that anybody who comes into Nigeria with after paying for the visa, paying for your flight ticket and all of that, they would know what it is that they're coming here for. And as long as they don't have any kind of criminal record within their country and they're not flagged on Interpol or any of the other sets of security databases that we're going to be using, then we should welcome them with open arms, because ultimately these are the people that are going to be creating jobs for our people.
Head out to a break right now. When we return, you mentioned processes that it will be followed, and Nigerians If you've been through our airport before, you know that those processes, even as Nigerians traveling out or making use of the airport, those processes can actually be bypassed. Corruption by immigration officers, by officers at the airport, is another thing we should be looking at. But let's go to break. When we return, we'll talk about how these processes can be strengthened.
Join us and explain a bit of that process to us. And he said, just trust Africans. But Ajuri said, no, it's not just about the trust. It's that we need to get this right. Ajuri Ngelale is a senior special assistant for public affairs in the presidency. He's joining us from Abuja, and you can also watch him live because we're live on Facebook and YouTube right now. You're welcome back. I'm Wemimo Adewuni.
I'm Sheriff Quadri. Please, we're seeing your comments. Keep dropping your questions for Ajuri. And we'll take them as we go along. But for now, we need to, before we get back to Ajuri in Abuja, we need to take a few calls and hear some thoughts Nigerians have got as regards this topic that we are discussing this morning, visa on arrival for Africans. Here are the numbers.
Call us on 01-277-0993, 01-277-1993, 01-277-2993, and 01-277-3993. This is Nigeria Info. We are listening.
Oh, yes, we are listening. Let's start off by taking some comments from Facebook. Fex Ezioke says, this is not the best decision at this time, considering the security situation of the country and the high rate of unemployment. Femi Tao says, are we saying any Thompson, Dixon and Harrison who just walk into the country even when they have no purpose or they're coming to cause commotion? We're still battling insurgency. Well, with what Mr. James Sunday said, the different categories of visa would also apply on arrival. Ismail Abdul Hafiz Akoni said, this is not a good idea for security reasons. Festus Okundia is asking, are those agencies that cannot check smuggling, are they the same ones to be entrusted with this responsibility? Says it's a wrong policy. Sisi Tiatia, I can't get the other name, says, what if you're a tourist? How does this work? There's a tourist visa if you're coming in as a tourist. Ajuri, the question goes on and on about security, and that's a big question on the minds of Nigerians, especially because we're still battling insecurity. And one of the reasons the borders are still shut is not just because of rice and petrol smuggling, it's also because of security. So the big question here again is, do we have intense plans? Remember that currently we don't even have a database of Nigerians. Like I always say to people, my name could be Aisha in Lagos. I could go to the next streets and my name is Titi. I mean, I could be anything, anywhere I want to be right now in this country and almost get away with it. So how, after giving them the visas, so someone says they're coming in, maybe visiting visa as a tourist, and then they just disappear and we can't find them. So what's the plan to make sure that this does not turn around to hurt the country?
Thank you very much. We are absolutely sympathetic to the fact that we have been battling security challenges now for several years. It's natural that Nigerians will be concerned about security when we talk about this visa on arrival program. And that is why we're working very hard to make sure our people understand the specifics of how the program works. There are a lot of long-standing perceptions about Nigerian government agencies, particularly when you talk about immigration and customs, police, and some of the others, where obviously there's a lot of distrust and there's a sense out there that the right things are not being done. And so what we're saying is this. We have set up a system that is not just dependent on one agency or one official of one agency doing the right thing. What you're going to have at all of these checkpoints is a coalition of rotating agents, right, from multiple agencies working together in the same process. So instead of, because just before we went on the break, my brother asked, he made the comment about the idea that you can give chocolate to somebody and they can change their mind or do something wrong. Well, that is a reality of our history. That's a reality of our past. But I would challenge any Nigerian to, bring up an example in recent years where they've gone into an airport, right, and paid somebody with customs or immigration, right, to basically not stamp a passport or to overlook an expired visa. I personally have not seen anything like that. I've been in the media. I have not heard about an incident like that. So I think we should also acknowledge progress that has been made. To the point that you made, Wemimo, which is a very important point, the idea that people are basically not being tracked in the country. I think there are, this isn't an all or nothing proposition. Every nation, whether you're first world or third world or in between, it's about progression, right? The key is what direction are you going in? When we talk about the BVN, we talk about the NIMC and the capturing of the NIN and all of the things that go on. The recent linking of, if you want to go now to go and get your passport, for example, as a Nigerian citizen, you have to go and take a tax clearance certificate to show that you have paid your taxes, for example. We have been working very hard over the last 4 years to link all of these processes and databases together to check exactly what you're referring to when you talk about, identity management and making sure that people are effectively tracked. The next point I want to make is very important, is that these individuals coming into the country are coming in for specific types of visas. So, for example, somebody comes in for a visa on arrival, and that visa on arrival is for religious activity. Maybe he wants to go to the synagogue or some other church for maybe a weekend event or a month's event, whatever the case may be. He's going to have to give very precise information about where that location of that church is, where he's going to be staying, what the contact information is, how much money is he bringing into the country, so can it sustain him, and then how long is his visa going to be for? Is it going to be for 60 days? Is it going to be for a year? So these are all of these things, all of this information is being provided at the front. So not only are you going through the security checks that I've mentioned across the databases of these agencies internationally and domestically, you're now also having to be very precise about stating why you're in the country, and then once you do that, where are you going to be? So that if you tell me that you're going to be in the country for a month for a tourist visa for 1 month and you're going to Calabar and you're staying at a particular hotel, these are things that can be tracked and monitored. And I think that's very important for our people to understand. Yeah.
When I arrive here, I mean, when you go to the airport, on arrival, it's wow. I mean, everything is digitized. I mean, even you need to use your boarding pass before you are allowed in. I mean, all of the process has been reintegrated. It's technology that's capturing done right there. I don't see that done at our airport in Nigeria, not here in Lagos, by the way. I mean, all of the things are still being checked one after the other, manually, basically almost manually. Can't we take a cue from Ghana? Currently, Nigeria has access to visa on arrival in 45 countries. But for most of those countries, you need to apply from here before you leave. You don't just leave Nigeria and show up there. You need to at least start the process online. But what we've been told is we're not doing that. We're saying you're all Africans, just come. But what about the technology to make sure that this tracking is possible?
Yeah, thank you very much, Wemimo. I think a part of it is understanding the fact that our infrastructure right now is undergoing upgrades. And I'm not just talking about just the limited, narrow scope of technology that you're talking about right now, which has to do with identity, which has to do with immigration management and all of that. I'm actually talking about the fact that if you're, for example, you mentioned Lagos International Airport. We know what the facilities in the old Murtala Mohammed International Airport terminals are like. It's not a secret to anybody who has ever passed through that. Now, we're about to unveil the new Lagos International Airport, for example. I believe it's going to be opening up by June 2020, in about 6 months from now, right? In Abuja and Port Harcourt, we've already seen the new facilities. These things go hand in hand. You have scanning systems in these new airports that simply are not available in our older airports, that weren't available until they had opened. So clearly, as we're progressing, as we're building this new infrastructure, it's evolving with the security measures that you're referring to. Unfortunately, those airports, the really critical airports like Lagos in particular, has not yet opened. But 6 months from now, that will be available for all Nigerians to see and experience.
Infrastructure. And this is very critical because we're saying that Africans can come in. You mentioned earlier that there are categories of visas, which Mr. James Sunday also mentioned before, he had to leave. So despite the categories of visas, people will still come in. The categories of visas will not limit the number of people that will come in, because we're saying that you all can come in. Don't worry. You all can come, because we're trying to promote integration in Africa. Look at the infrastructure we have right now, currently in Nigeria. Power, no. Roads, no. Housing, no. What are we having people coming to do?
Thank you.
Thank you for that question. It's a legitimate question. This is why we are, for the last 4 years or so, President Muhammadu Buhari has been so focused. When you hear President Buhari speak in public about policy, about activities of his government, 8 times out of 10, he's talking about infrastructure, the infrastructure that we're putting on ground. And I want to be very clear about what those are in specific terms. We know that in 2016, there was no Lagos-Ibadan rail line there. We started construction on that in 2017, and now you're seeing the free rides moving out from Iju across Abeokuta into Ibadan, right? Now that's going to take off, I think, in May. That's just one example. There are roads around the country. Look at Second Niger Bridge. That was a drawing. You now have 26-story pillars coming out of the water. They've already gone into the decking phase. A 206 billion naira bridge that has been in the works, has been talked about for 40 years and is finally getting done. You go to the north, you see Abuja Kaduna Kano Expressway is 6 lanes that is being constructed. You go to the south, you see Boni Bodo Road, finally linking NLNG, from Boni Island to the mainland for the first time ever. Right? That's a 120 billion naira road. Then you have the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway that's separate from the rail line that's being expanded with 4 new interchanges and all of that. These are just some of the projects going on. Now, within the new infrastructure plan that the president has put forward, the $22 billion plan, what do you have there? Because this is it goes very much in line with the conversation we're having in the visa on arrival. Because Mr. President has told the nation openly that once we had now signed the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, if we do not have the infrastructure that can compete effectively with the South Africas who already have the infrastructure, with the Moroccos, with the Egypts, with the Algerias, with the Kenyas and the Ghanas, if we don't have that infrastructure, the over $1 trillion that is going to come into the continent as a result of the agreement, the hundreds of millions of new jobs that are coming into the continent as a result of the agreement, they will choose these other countries. So we need the infrastructure now. Now, I want to be very specific in answering the question. When we talk about the infrastructure we need, we're talking about 2 things. We always talk about the hard infrastructure, which is very important: road networks, railways, seaports, airports, and all of that. We don't really talk much about the soft infrastructure. That's regulatory reforms, the ease of doing business reforms. 2 of the last 3 years, we've been named top 10 most improving nations in the world by the World Bank and the ease of doing business because of the reforms that have taken place across the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary to ease the flow of business in the country. So all of these things are being worked on. Nigerians would not pretend not to see the new Port Harcourt International Airport, which in 2015, anybody that's from Port Harcourt, like I am, knows that there's a domestic terminal which was about 50% completed, but the international terminal in Port Harcourt was a slab of a foundation on the ground, no walls, no ceiling, nothing. It was done in the last 3 years. So Abuja Airport finished as well. Lagos, Kano will both finish by June 2020.
You could see my
and
face
we just signed a new deal.
I'm smiling, but I'll tell you why I'm smiling. We have Vincent on the line. He's been waiting for a while. Vincent, good morning. Welcome to the show.
Okay.
My sister.
Welcome.
That guy is trying so hard to convince you guys in the studio, and millions of Nigerians listening to what he's saying.
Are you not convinced?
I am not. In fact, I am less convinced. Not just being convinced. I am less convinced. But he is trying to justify the whatever is being employed to tell us all those.
So what do you make? What's your thoughts about the visa on arrival?
You know what? These guys, they are just always trying to remove to refocus us from what is happening. I know very well that we have heavy and mega trust issues about governance in Nigeria, and this very one is in there can never make any difference. You and I know very well that Nigeria has a very big problem with data issues. If you want to do your driver license now, do your BVN, do whatever, you will go there manually. They have not been able to reconcile this data. And I don't know why this guy wants to convince us. We have certified governance structure in Nigeria. We're just being mere semantics.
In your opinion, we're not ready for this. That's what you're saying.
Well, he's back to the infrastructure. And Ajuri, I said I was smiling when you mentioned the road networks, the airports being fixed. But if you would agree, I'd ask you if you agree, that Nigeria is quite late in this infrastructure we're talking about, with a population of over 200 million.
Right.
I mean, what we're talking about is what we should have talked about in the 80s. And with the population explosion, if you look at the exponential increase in population that would happen, what we are building right now would absolutely not make up with the population increase. So if we're saying we're fixing Lagos-Ibadan expressway, we should have done that in the 80s.
Right.
I mean, that's not a conversation for 2019. Yes. Where in Lagos there's a lockdown, where there's a little party holding somewhere. But let's also speak with Kenny, who's on the line.
Right.
Kenny, good morning to you. Hold on, Ajuri, please.
Yeah, Kenny, welcome to the show.
Good morning. Yeah, thank you for this show. Now, what I actually want to talk about, Sheriff asked a very, very important question, which has to do with infrastructure.
Yes.
And honestly speaking, I was carefully listening to Ajuri, and I'm thinking we are putting the cart before the horse. Before you start bringing policies about free entry visa and things like that, you should have fixed the infrastructure first. You are talking about the fact that we need technology to track people that come in, and we are currently working on the technology. And you want to ask people to start coming in. If you look at the whole thing,
in a few weeks time.
You want to the whole thing. It just shows that if there is no plan, and there is no integration between all these government agencies. Everybody is just doing what they like. I'm telling you the fact. I don't see a reason why we should start this free visa policy.
So you are saying we should fix the infrastructure before we start this?
That is the normal thing.
Right. All right. Let's
and that's number one. Sorry. Just to add,
quickly, please.
If you go through Lagos Airport today, you know how stressful it is. It has improved a little, but compared to other airports in the world, look at how
even in Africa, compared to other airports in Africa,
even in Ghana, there. And then you now want to introduce a new policy and say you will bring in more immigration officers. Forget it. It's not going to work.
All right, Kelly.
Thank you, Kenny. Let's head quickly to WhatsApp, shall we?
Yeah.
And take a few comments from here. Someone is asking, what of those coming by road? Well, you have to face the same thing at the port. Another question says, free entry for all Africans with mountain of problems in this country. If we're not careful, this may result in another Ghana must go saga. Why? Says, will other African countries do the same for Nigerians going to their countries? That's a good question there. Another one says, my question is... Okay, no, I don't understand your question. Olaide Cruz says misplaced priority. Federal government didn't know what they were dealing with. It seems like there are some people who are confusing the government on different bad policies to make the president fail. Says a country that's porous in security and internal strategy cannot succeed with such policies. Says immigration is speaking too much grammar and this might just fail. Olukayade Abogori says on WhatsApp, I think the government did not think this through properly. With this present level of facilities and amenities, this visa policy would only put more strain on them.
Let's quickly have Gucci here.
Can I?
Calling from Abule. Gucci, good morning to you.
Morning. Good morning.
Is your name Gucci?
Gochi, as in G-O-O-C-H-I-I.
Okay.
Gochi, all right. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think the policy is very, very, very beautiful. And
the first person who thinks it's beautiful.
We are being futuristic. I called some time ago when this topic was raised. I did something about it. I saw it coming 3 years ago. You know. So the thing is this, but the problem we are having, like some Nigerians have been expressing, is this: the government has another job to do in the sensitizing the people, the benefit we stand to gain. And when these African brothers start coming, how are we going to welcome them? It's very, very beautiful. So we shouldn't condemn it. But the problem is the government needs to explain to us Nigerians what we stand to gain.
Right.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Murtaza Meki Yusuf also shares that opinion. It says the vision entry point into Nigeria for all Africans is a good idea since an ECOWAS charter has earlier granted this right to West Africans. It says, but at a time when goods and services of these countries are barred from Nigeria, what are they coming to do? Joy Forever also says it might be good for trade, but for airport users, it means more hours to be wasted for clearing, considering the snail work of immigration and the demand. They need to register online first to help with planning, and also so the airlines should have records. Sulaiman Bidemi on Twitter says, what happens to the migrants already in the country? My thought on this visa on arrival is to make it website-based registration so there would not be overcrowding at the airports, seaports, and the borders.
Ajuri, would you like to respond to any of these contributions?
Yes, of course.
Yes, of course. Yes, absolutely. First of all, my sister mentioning, that the fact that the infrastructure needed to be built 40 years ago. Absolutely, it needed to be built 40 years ago, but it wasn't, and we all know why it wasn't. So we cannot afford to now lament that these things should have been done and then not do them. We have to do them now so that we can move forward as a country, and so that's what we're doing. The realities of our revenue challenges, the realities of where we are right now. There's no nation in the world, you name it, China, US, you name the country. No nation in the world built that country by themselves. They had people come in and invest their money, people from Europe, people from Asia, people from the Middle East. They came and invested their money. That's how jobs were employed. That's how infrastructure was built. That's how revenue was generated to build power plants, to build railways, to build highways. That's how it happens. It doesn't just, you don't just have a magical budget from the sky. It's revenue generation that is coming from industries that come into your country. And we need to understand these details, because if we don't, we will just be thinking that everything in Nigeria will be fixed by Nigerian government. That is an illusion. That is not the way it works anywhere. So for us now, the question we need to answer for ourselves is this. On the one hand, when we close the land border, even though now everybody is seeing the positive benefits of it in terms of revenue generation, in terms of the reduction in PMS diversion and all of that, even the inflow of weapons, even insecurity, herdsmen and all of that, we're seeing a lot of changes. Even though we've seen all of that, we will now say, okay, Mr. President, when you close the border, it means you don't want free trade. Now our president is against free trade, right? Now, when Mr. President is now opening the way for people to come in to do legitimate business, to bring their cash flows and revenues into the country, we now say, Mr. President doesn't know what he's doing. No, he's going to overflood the country. So it tells you that there's not a consistency in the opinion around the country. And so for us, what we need to do...
In what the government is doing when the border is shut on one.
Yes, no, there is, and that's what yes.
The ports on the other.
No, that's exactly my point.
That's exactly my point, my sister, is that these are two separate issues. You're closing a land border. We're talking of airports. We're talking of when you get your visa on arrival, you have flown in from a place, right? The only difference between what is happening now, what will happen in January, and what is happening, what has been happening for the last 2 or 3 years since we really changed the e-visa system, is simply that instead of them going to the embassy or the consulate in their country, the Nigerian embassy and consulate in their country, which, by the way, are in many cases understaffed, and there are challenges around. We all know what the challenges are for our embassies and consulates abroad. You have somebody, just for example, I'll make it very understandable for everybody to hear. If somebody wants to start a $3 million factory somewhere in Kogi or Lagos or anywhere, right? He's in his own country. He's in Rwanda. He wants to start a company in Lagos. Now, he goes to the embassy or the consulate in Rwanda. He goes there and he sees the attitude, or he sees that, they're not open every day. And even when they're open, I feel like I'm not moving forward. He now says, okay, fine, Nigerians are not serious. Instead, let me just go to Morocco, or let me go to one of these other countries, and he will build his $3 million factory.
The Nigerian Immigration Service in 2017 had already started this visa on arrival for people who don't have, countries where we don't have our embassies at all, or where our embassies are not active, and for especially people who want to come do business here. We already opened that up. So, but this is a wider door.
I'm not talking. No. Wemimo, I'm not talking about consulates that are closed, embassies that are closed. That's not what I said. What I said is where you have a situation where we have seen, how many instances have we seen on social media where somebody is breaking car windows out of frustration because of an experience they had in a Nigerian embassy or consulate abroad. These things happen. These are realities. I'm sure even within your own nuclear family, somebody will tell you a story of what happened to them at a consulate abroad. I don't know what it is, where the challenges are, but they're very real challenges. So what we're saying is that these things have real, I'm coming, let me just finish my point.
Ajuri, we do.
And that challenge is time, because
I wish we could go on, because I wanted to know, how we intend to protect our citizens. Yes. If we're opening our doors to people will come in with money.
We've been talking all about that, the databases, the processes. That's what we have been talking about this whole time.
We have Abia, who's been on the line, but can we listen to him for just 30 seconds?
He's been on the line for a very long time.
Abia.
Wemimo.
Good morning. Can you take 30 seconds? We're on our way out, please.
I'm very sorry. Wemimo.
Yes, sir.
Security issue is a problem here we are facing.
Yes.
Especially in my locality, where I live in Aja. We run every day up and down because of these cowboys.
Yes, okay, that Aja matter. I just spoke with the newsroom about it this morning. We're going to be covering that story very soon, okay? We just talked about it this morning. Thank you for calling, but Nigeria, we need to go. We thank you all for your comments, and we thank massively Mr. James Sunday. He had to go. He was traveling. That is the public relations officer of the Nigerian Immigration Service. We also have Ajuri Ngelale, Senior Special Assistant for Public Affairs in the Presidency. Ajuri, thank you for joining the show.
Yep.
I want to thank you guys.
I want to thank you guys. I want to thank our listeners for listening. And I just want to once again, please ask our people to be patient with us. We're doing the right thing in the interest of job creation, in the interest of the economic transformation of this country. Please be patient with us. And I look forward to coming back to discuss further at any time you invite me.
More calls, but we really must go now. Ajuri, thank you very much.
Please do.
We're back tomorrow morning.
That's right.
God bless you.
Morning Crossfire with another